Make sure you're always working with the most recent version of the PDF because you never know when changes have been made, because today we're going to graph this Tesla Select financial data. So I start with the PDF so that you can see that we have our basic header with just our file name, not our tab name, and page 8 as our footer. And then we have a bar graph representing our cash and cash equivalents, and a line graph representing our net cash provided by operating activities. Let's toggle on over and see that this is actually a standalone tab, this graph, with inside of our Excel spreadsheet. So let's see how that's going to work. Let's start with cash and cash equivalents. If we go to our analysis tab, we had pulled that in, and this is the data that we want to plot. So let's highlight 21, 22, 23, and navigate to insert. And we're going to use one of these 2D column graphs to be our starting point in here. Now notice when we bring that up, we've got a brand new set of menus up here, chart design and chart format, and we have selected the entire outer area of here. I'm going to move my cursor onto this graph and I'm going to right mouse click because there should be an option for move the chart. And when you move the chart, we're going to move it into a new sheet and give it its own standalone sheet. Now I'm going to caution you, and I'm going to go back really quickly to this tab, and I'm just going to make another one real quick, just to show you that sometimes when you're making a graph, notice how I have the outside selected, and that's what gave me the ability to move my chart. But if I accidentally click again, and now notice how I have two things selected, when I go to right mouse click with two things selected, my options change. So be careful where you're clicking is my point, and then that way you'll have the options available to you. So this chart 2, I'm going to call it our graph, and this is our work in progress. And let's move this analysis tab just to its left so that I can go back and forth between what I'm trying to do and what it's going to look like when we're done. So the series of customizations we can starts with up here, Tesla Select Financial Data. If I go and left mouse click on top of that chart title, I get these design elements to come up again. So from chart design, I have specific choices, but I also have my traditional home command where I could do something like, why don't we make all of the data in here, and notice it selected the chart title. If I select that, I could easily make it, let's say, a 20 font, and I could make it bold, and then I could just start typing into the box, Tesla, select, financial data, and then hit enter, and it updates that automatically. You can also click inside that box, or you can even double click into the box itself, and that should give you the ability to type in there. So there are multiple ways that you can always get to it. Just make sure you're working with the proper element. And those elements are often what we call under chart design, chart elements. That element was the chart title. We're now going to add a legend at the top of our graph, which looks then here to below to be the beginning of the descriptions for what we see. But notice it's called Series 1 right now. The reason is because if we go to Chart Design and select Data, this Series 1, it just knows to be our range from B3 to D3. We can edit that to customize it. Instead of leaving the series name blank, let's go back to our analysis and we'll click on the title, Cash and Cash Equivalents. Then I like to use the Tab key to go to my next field. That way it navigates without me making any mistakes on the key on the mouse. And now it shows me here's the actual data. So when I click OK, notice it now says blue is Cash and Cash Equivalents. Additionally, though, if you look at the bottom, notice that our x-axis isn't labeled properly. It just says 1, 2, 3 when we want it to have the years. The way we can do that is make sure to select cash and cash equivalents, and you have something called, it looks different and found different in the Mac, but it's the same concept of a horizontal category or axis label that I can edit. And then I can go back to that analysis tab and I'll select those. So that becomes my range of values so that when I click OK, notice they show up down below, and I'll click OK again. And now I have the basic beginnings of my graph. But let's add the additional customizations. Notice this panel came up on the side. I'm going to close it off and show you how to get to it because I like it a lot. If you left click to activate the graph, and notice I get my menus, If you go to the Format menu, there's something called Format Selection here. Now, Format Selection is a lot of what we see up at the top. I just find it easier to work within these options here. Like if we look at the graph that we want to have on this Graph tab, we need this to be gray. Let's see how that works. If I make sure that I am selecting, and notice how my selection is, I see the dots around my 3 columns. I want that to be paint can filled, and the fill that I want is a solid fill, which now I can choose what color I want that to be. And specifically, I'm going to choose more colors, and I'm going to go under custom colors. And while I was playing around, I'll show you that I searched and I found Tesla's color schemes. I must have hidden that tab, Tesla Company Colors, where I went in there and saw that if I want Tesla's exact color, it's 20400. So that's what my color is entered into as the RGB 20400. So now I have a nice color scheme to my graph that matches Tesla's, but oops, I didn't mean for it to be that color. I actually wanted it to be the gray color. So again, how did we get there? If I make sure that I'm selecting on those 3, be careful, right? I can select off. I'm not selecting those 3. Now, 1, 2, 3, from the paint can, solid fill, color, more colors. I believe that the gray one is 129, 129, 129. So let's make that 129, 129, 129. And now I have my columns set up. Let's go ahead and add these data labels in here. Again, with my graph selected, and really doesn't matter where for adding elements, but chart design, add chart element, these are called data labels. And I'm going to put these ones on the center of them. And notice they're really dark and faint and hard to see. Once again, I can left click on top. I've grabbed all 3 of them now. I can easily navigate to home, and I believe I want to make these 16, and then I want to make them bold. But notice they're also whited out with boxes around them. Let's see how you do that. And notice the 3 items are selected. If you're not sure how, click off somewhere and then just click on to your columns and then on to these. And if you want to click on just one, you could do that. And you notice it's selecting only 1 instead of 3. Let's select all 3. And it's under the paint can where I can tell it, let's have a solid fill. Since it's being filled in gray in the background already, let's make that part white. And let's give it a border around it, and let's make that border a solid line, and we could make it any color we want. It looks like it picked up and defaulted to our red. I don't think I want it to be red though. So let's change that color and just make it into a basic black. And so now I have the beginnings of my column graphs. Now I just realized that the column graphs is actually supposed to have its box up above. So let's move it. I can left click on those easily. And then look on this last tab, it asks, what's the position? I originally told it center. I actually don't want it to be center anymore. I think I want it to be outside on the end. So that's an easy enough fix. And now I have my 17, 16, 16 on my top. Let's go ahead and add the second component, which is now this line graph. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to start off on this graph tab by selecting more data. So I select onto my graph, so I get my chart design, then I can select data, and this time we're going to add a second series. That second series name that we need to work with now is off of the analysis tab. I believe we are doing on our second one, net cash provided by operating activities is the name, tab, and then let's highlight the 3 values from 11.4 to 13.2 and click OK. And notice it immediately comes up automatically like a second column. I'm going to show you how to change that right now. If I click OK over here and I have my graph selected, under Chart Design, there's a button for Change Chart Type. From here, instead of 2 columns, I'm going to choose a combo graph. The first one, cash and cash equivalents, we're going to leave as that column. The second one now, I have the choice of what I want to make it to, and it automatically suggested, how about a line graph for you? And if I wanted, I could even create a secondary axis where it would describe this line graph only on the right side and would describe the column only on the left. I think that's fascinating. But because the numbers are very similar in size, we're going to leave it off right now and let it just look like this, and then go back and make our customizations. So the first customization it looks like is the series here. So I'm going to select carefully. Notice I've got these three pulled up, and now it's asking me to format my data series. I've got lines, I've got markers that I can play with. So let's start with the line. The line is automatically this orange. Let's make it a solid line. And I believe the color scheme that I used for this one was the red, and that red is 20400. So from here, I have my line selected, paint can, solid line, fill it with a color, more colors, and I want it to be 20400. So now I should have the fancy red line, but the red line also needs to be thicker than it is being presented right now. So with the line selected, I can go ahead and go back to my paint can, and I believe the width I had it set to was 325, so that it's a little bit thicker of a line for us to see. Now notice it too has data labels, but they're really difficult to see, so let's format those into place. So if I click on this line right here, it's asking me to format my data series. Let's go ahead and look under chart design and add chart element. Let's look what it's got. It's got data labels already centered for us. I think we should put those below. Now they're underneath and below, but they're still hard to see. Let's click on them once. Notice all three are activated. Then from here, if I want, I can change the data labels. I believe we have these filled in with the paint can solidly with the white, and that's what allows it to stand out against the gray background. We can also use, since they are already selected, our home menu, and we can make them bolded. And then I believe we made our last one 16, so let's make them all 16. And now my graph is starting to look like the other. But notice this 1420, 724 is pulled way down, where mine here is kind of overlapping it. All I'm going to do is click once. Notice it grabbed all three. Then I'm going to click a second time. Now it's grabbing only that one. I'm going to put my cursor very carefully onto this label, because watch, if I click off, click on, I've got all three, click again, now I've just got this one, but notice your cursor can move in a couple of different positions here, up, down, left, right, on an angle, or I want it to be the arrow. And once it's the arrow, I can hold down my left mouse, and then I missed, of course, and then hold down my left mouse. Is it not the arrow, Al? Yeah, oh, it's the crosshairs. Did you see that difference? How it went from the arrow to the, I'm going to show it again because it's really hard to sometimes get your cursor to. That's why I don't like using the mouse, but it was that there. When I hold down my left mouse, there's my crosshair, and now I can move this thing around. And then what it does is it shows what's called a little leader line there. See that little teeny line that's connecting them? That's called a leader line, connecting them. Lastly, let's get these markers on here. So I'm going to highlight again the line, and now I'm working with that data series. Let's go over off of the paint tab to the marker. The marker has its own options, which includes the type of marker you want. Let's use a built-in one, and the one I think is fun is this little star-looking one down here. And let's make it, I think, 10 big is what I made it before. But notice it's filled in orange. I don't want it to be orange, so I can choose to change the fill to be solid fill. And since we were using that red, it actually remembers the red that we picked already, or you could always do more colors and do your custom. And this was that 20400. And now I have nice little markers. But if I look really closely, and I can see it up here in the legend, I want to make sure there's no line around those markers. So I'm going to go to that paint can, and here's the line around it. Notice it's got a line that is a solid line automatically in red. Look, I can make it orange if I wanted to, but I don't want my line to be orange. And my marker, let's check my marker. It's filled. Does it have a line? Yeah, look, technically it has a little teeny orange line that you can't really see. So off of paint can marker border, I'm going to tell it to take that line off. And now my graph over here should look the exact same as it did in the answer key.